Trump ordered new Chinese tariffs over objections of advisors. Live video. Washington. President Trump overruled advisors to ramp up tariffs on China after a heated exchange in which he insisted levies were the best way to make Beijing comply with U.S. demands, according to people familiar with the matter. Barring a break in the impasse, the U.S. is now poised to impose 10% tariffs on roughly $300 billion in Chinese imports that aren't currently taxed starting September 1. Battle lines are, Mr. Trump, who has speculated the Chinese may be waiting to negotiate with a possible Democratic successor, says a strong U.S. economy gives Washington the upper hand if the dispute drags on. But advisors argued trade talks in Shanghai last week were brief and unproductive. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin were in China for a little over 24 hours, and their itinerary consisted of a dinner the night they arrived and a meeting that lasted about 3 hours Wednesday. Neither team was accompanied by large staffs needed for detailed technical discussions, as in past rounds. The talks last week. After returning, the trade negotiators and other top advisors congregated early Thursday afternoon in the Oval Office to brief Mr. Trump on the talks. Mr. Trump, who had a re-election rally scheduled in Ohio later that day, wanted to be able to assure farmers who have been hardest hit by the trade fight as China scaled back purchases of U.S. corn, soybeans, and pork that he had at least secured concrete commitments from the Chinese that they would boost their purchases of U.S. agricultural exports. But to his frustration, Messrs. Lighthizer and Mnuchin tariffs, Mr. Trump said to his team, one of the people said. Those present include all of them, save Mr. Navarro, a China hawk, adamantly objected to the tariffs, the people said. That spurred a debate. The president said his patience had worn thin and stood by his argument that tariffs were the best form of leverage, the person said. His advisors eventually conceded, one of these people said, and then helped the president draft the tweet announcing an extension of tariffs to essentially all Chinese imports. The decision followed weeks of advice from some of Mr. Trump's advisors, including his son-in-law Jared Kushner, to put China talks on the back burner, according to the People and a former administration official. The president's advisors urged Mr. Trump to focus on other trade pacts, including the pending deal with Canada and Mexico, which still needs congressional approval, as well as talks with Japan, which in recent weeks have gained momentum, these people said. Proponents for standing pat on China argue that any deal with Beijing is likely to be attacked as too soft by Democrats in Congress, and that an escalation in tariffs will eventually start to become a drag on the economy, the people said. The stock market is one of Mr. Trump's primary gauges of economic confidence, and until late last week Wall Street had been riding high. Mr. Trump's the economic effects of the trade dispute, at least in President Trump's eyes, haven't been massive on the U.S. economy, and he's got what he thinks the Fed is lowering rates to accommodate his trade policy, said Chad Bown, a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Perhaps that the response, however, was swift. Stocks plunged. Consumer products that had been spared in previous rounds, including smartphones, apparel, toys, and video games, will now be subject to tariffs. The U.S.-China Business Council, which represents companies that do business in China, expressed fears about the impact on its members. China has its own pressures on the domestic front. The Trump administration this week, just before the trade talks got underway, China's foreign ministry accused Washington of being behind mass anti-government protests in Hong Kong, with a spokeswoman calling them the work of the U.S. Within Chinese government circles, there are strong voices against any deal with the Trump administration, said Myron Brilliant, head of international affairs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. With each escalation, despite the deterioration in talks, Mr. Trump signaled confidence in the U.S. position from his New Jersey golf resort on Saturday. things are going on. They are paying us tens of billions of dollars, made possible by their monetary devaluations and pumping in massive amounts of cash to keep their system going. So far write to Vivian Salama at viviansalama@wsj.com and Josh Zumbran at joshzumbran@wsj.com.
Raindrop, truck top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.